So today I'm going to be talking about Daqan, the horrors that are experienced by diaspora Somali youth in rehabilitation camps, or just the rehabilitation, the cultural rehabilitation experience for Somali youth. And we'll go over the forcible return and rehabilitation of young Somalis in Africa and the Middle East, and some of its ties with human trafficking, and that it is a human rights violation. So, what is Daqan Alis? Daqan Alis is a Somali phrase that translates to a return to culture or rehabilitating into the culture. It refers to a process of forcibly, coercively taking children to Africa or the Middle East and putting them through a rehabilitation process that's intended to psychologically, physically, mentally, and emotionally break down the resistance. And we'll talk about what that resistance is, what are the causes for Daqan Alis in general. But it's meant to break down the psychological, physical, mental, and emotional resistance, independence, and identity of the individual experiencing it. Daqan Alis practices involve elements of human trafficking, particularly when they involve coercion, exploitation, or abuse of individuals. Daqan Alis is a practice used by some Somali parents to take their children to Africa, often against their will, to enforce cultural and traditional norms. The reasons for this practice include concerns about their children becoming too westernized, or leaving Islam, or the fears that their children will become ex-Muslims, fear of losing their cultural identity, desires to control their children's behavior, and attempts to force traditional gender roles and marriage on their children. So the methods used to enforce these practices can involve forced marriages, forced pregnancies for women and girls, female genital mutilation, detention camps, boarding schools, prisons, conversion therapy, exorcisms, passport confiscation, and abandonment. Some Somali parents bring their children to countries that are devastated by war, political instability, and corruption, where laws are not strictly enforced, allowing for grave violations of human rights to be perpetrated as a means of gaining greater control over their children. So in today's video, we'll explore the reasons why Somali parents resort to Daqan Alis, what are some of the historical contexts that drive the Daqan Alis process, and the different ways that it can look, because it doesn't always look the same, and sometimes it can be hard to spot, and it's not always in camps. I'd like to call Daqan Alis more as a process, a rehabilitation process, rather than just rehabilitation centers. We'll go over the underlying motives and intentions, the methods used to justify it, the pretexts employed to facilitate it, and the events that typically occur during Daqan Alis. So where does Daqan Alis occur? We talked about a little bit on that there are elements of human trafficking within Daqan Alis, and it's generally moving children and youth. Usually it happens to children and youth, children between preteens all the way to sometimes late teens and into the early 20s. But it can happen at later ages as well. I don't want to narrow it down to just a specific age group, because the more important aspect of it is, what does Daqan Alis look like? How can you spot it? And once that happens, you can see the elements of human trafficking that are involved, and it is incredibly devastating. So where does Daqan Alis occur? So it generally starts from Western countries. So that's the typical area of origin of the movement of these peoples. So this can happen from the United States. So children are moved from the United States or Canada, the United Kingdom, Scandinavian countries, Australia, and sometimes even parts of the Middle East, even between countries in the Middle East, and the most of the places where the children and people are taken are to Somalia, Kenya, Ethiopia, Egypt, and some Middle Eastern countries. And so it's important to know Daqan Alis can happen within diaspora communities themselves. So the Daqan Alis process can occur even in Western countries, and that's why I prefer to focus more on the Daqan Alis process. But the movement of people as a way of human trafficking can be seen within Daqan Alis, when, especially when children are moved from between countries, is a big piece of that pretty much a lot of people are aware of. And usually the Daqan Alis process is usually done under false pretenses. So there's a lot of justifications that are made, and we'll go over what that process looks like from various domains. So, for example, the school systems, within healthcare systems, within the criminal justice system, within just a lot of different areas that could spark some red flags when Daqan Alis is about to happen. Daqan Alis is a public health crisis. The amount of damage that occurred to Somali youth as a result of the Daqan Alis process can be, first of all, it's hard for Western countries or public health officials to spot it, which allows it to occur more often than, and it's hard to stop it.